Amazing. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. Got quite a few people registering their interest for today's topic. We will just wait as people arrive before we get started. We really appreciate your time and value that it is a very precious commodity in this day and age. So we will get started shortly. The Q&A is open, so please don't hesitate to use it throughout the session. As the session goes on, Anthony from Think&Grow will revert to some of your questions, and at the end, if we have some more time, we'll obviously go through what we have. Awesome. Thank you guys all for joining us this morning. We do have quite a number of registrants, so we will just wait a few more minutes to see if anyone else joins us. The Q&A box is open and is there for you guys to use throughout the discussion, so please don't hesitate to use it at your discretion. We'll get started shortly. Amazing. All right. So today we're joined by Anthony Sochan, who is our co-founder of Think&Grow, and he has invited along Anthony Millet, and I don't quite know how we're going to do the two Anthonys today, but there's only the two of them, so it won't be too confusing as the day goes on. And Anthony Millet from Antler is also joining us today. So Ant, I'll let you introduce Anthony and today's topic.
Thank you very much, MJ. Welcome, everyone. Great to see quite a few familiar names joining us today. For those that don't know me, I'm Ant. I'm the co-founder of Think&Grow, and very, very, very pleased to have the other Ant, Anthony Millet from Antler here. Look, I might actually just let Ant sort of introduce himself, maybe just go over his sort of background and history a little bit, so you get a little bit of the context, and then touch on who Antler is if you don't know them, but also what Ant is doing at Antler as well. So you just get the full picture. So if that's not too much of a mouthful, mate, I might hand over to you to take the reins quickly.
Awesome. Thanks very much for having us, and welcome to everyone that's attending, and thank you for giving up your time. I'm Ant Millet. I'm a partner at Antler. For those of you that don't know Antler, we're the world's most active early stage venture capital investor, and now the world's most active AI investor. I launched our Australian business with my colleague Bede back in 2019, which was Antler's second office. We started in Singapore, and fast forward to today, we operate in 30 cities around the world. Last year, we had 160,000 people look to come and build a business with Antler, and we ended up creating 410 new companies where we were the earliest investor in those companies, and then helped them scale and grow. So our broader portfolio now has 1,500 companies, and by virtue of that, we're seeing a tremendous amount of activity within the AI world, alongside many other sectors, many functions, and many different technologies. Prior to joining Antler, I am still a recovering founder, having built two technology businesses. The first one was Europe's largest e-commerce sports store, which we grew into 9 countries, and then ultimately exited to JD Sports, so a large sports fashion business in Europe, or now global. And then I moved to Australia, having married an Australian. I'm sure that's probably a familiar travel path for many on the line, where I then launched and ran and grew and scaled a business called BrickX, which is a fractional property investing business between 2016 and 2019. and then ultimately joining and launching Antler then. I now, at Antler, I now look after, spend most of my time looking after the capital side of our business. So I'm working very closely with our investors, a lot of sovereign wealth funds, a lot of family offices, a lot of high net worth individuals, and institutions, helping them understand what we're seeing and where we're investing, and they're investing alongside us, whether in our funds or co-investing with us. But can't give up my founder itch, and so also sit on a number of boards across our portfolio, mainly our Australian companies, ranging everything from deep tech AI all the way through to scalable SMB insurance.
Wonderful. Thank you. And look, just for disclosure purposes, at Think&Grow, we are LPs in Antler, in the Australian fund. So I just thought I'd mention that. Look, I guess you've got an interesting seat right now, watching what's going on in the world. This pitch that you're going out to these sort of institutional investors, family offices, sovereign wealth funds, etc. Give us a TLDR. What are you sort of talking to these funds about at the moment?
I think this shift that we're seeing, in this technology shift that we're seeing, people call it different things, the fourth industrial revolution, whatever you want to call it. What is really quite phenomenal is the speed at which this is moving at. And I really think that the world is largely unprepared for what is coming and the pace of change that is coming, or quite frankly, the pace of change that is happening today. I don't know what the right number is, whether it's 90% or 95% of people have their head in the sand around AI. I think everyone accepts that AI is a thing, but what people don't realize is how powerful these devices are. I'm trying to show a phone here, how powerful these things in our pockets are right now in giving us tremendous leverage in being able to be far more creative, create new businesses, create new business models, and ultimately disrupt incumbent processes and incumbent companies. We're seeing, and this pace of change is actually now really being driven by corporates, which is super interesting. So having built companies for 12 years and then been investing for 7 years, the pace at which our AI companies are growing, we've never seen anything like it. We're seeing corporates, large corporations flying around the world, coming to our startup offices, sitting down with our companies that are 6 weeks, 12 weeks old, negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts, because the impact of their technology within these corporations can both help them grow their revenue, accelerate their revenue at an unprecedented pace, help them remove cost from their businesses at a rate and opportunity they've never had the opportunity to do before. And more than anything, they've got tremendous FOMO that if they don't jump onto this technology now, their competitors will, and they'll be left behind. And so, one of the stats that we've been talking about a little bit is that of AI companies that are getting to $5 million, the median time, or the mean time it's taking companies to get there, is about 24 months, whereas their SaaS peers of older age were taking about 37 months. So we're getting to almost half the time it's taking for companies to get to this level of revenue. And a lot of that is being driven by large corporations that are really starting to embrace AI, incorporate it, which means it's an incredibly exciting time to be a founder, because hopefully you're spending a far shorter amount of time in that kind of valley of death, or that early traction phase where you're having to convince people to use your technology, and they can find every solution, and they can find every excuse under the sun as to why now's not the right time.
Yeah, great. So you're seeing these companies grow super fast. I've also heard, though, that customer churn in some cases can also be higher than SaaS companies. Are you seeing sort of, one sort of, I don't know, just like make the other, and it's just a cost neutral exercise, or is just the growth so high that really the churn doesn't matter?
No, we're not seeing churn as being a particular problem in the context of growth.
Okay.
I think what is really interesting about these AI tools is generally the speed of integration is very, 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 very high, which means the barriers to entry in terms of adoption and using them are low. But naturally, then the quicker you can implement something and experiment, the quicker you might decide, hey, this isn't the right thing for me, and you throw it out. And that's fine. And that means that there obviously needs to be a tremendous amount of focus on creating the right outcomes and getting the right customer set. But at this moment in time, we're seeing that the growth in the solutions far outweighs the churn. But I think we're also at a point where we don't really know what's a commodity and what isn't a commodity, and what's a valuable business and what might not be a valuable business. We're investors in a company called Lovable out of the Nordics. This was out of our Nordic fund. For those of you that don't know Lovable, it's a bit like Cursor, it's a bit like VO or Versal. Go and use it. It is incredibly empowering. You can just write, in plain English, build me a website for Think&Grow. We're an executive recruitment company. We specialize in these 5 areas. Our team members are this. Our brand colors are white and orange and black. And go, and it'll build you a website in 2 minutes that otherwise would have taken you hours to design, weeks with a web company, etc. And the empowerment of being able to build things, experiment, implement, change, evolve, is just insanely powerful now.
Yeah. And from I guess when you're kind of getting into these businesses and sort of looking under the hood, do they have different sort of capital needs to, I guess, the typical sort of SaaS businesses that you would have funded back in the day?
Yeah, I think I think it's important to almost not distinguish SaaS as old age SaaS and AI, in the sense that a lot of the old age SaaS stuff is transitioning to leveraging AI. So if you're not transitioning, you're very likely to be left behind. But what we are seeing is that because of these tools that are being developed, again, I talk about Lovable, Cursor, Versal, etc. They are, these are everything moving really from being co-pilots on coding, and we're now seeing co-pilots and automation agents across everything, to almost getting to full automation, to the point that you can see a team. We're now seeing teams of 3 software developers, experienced developers, capable of doing the same as a team of 30, and probably doing it in a fraction of the time, because they don't have the complexity of managing a team of 30. And obviously the speed at which the code is being written can be edited, can be tailored, that you can build. So the answer is yes. Like, the capital efficiency that we're seeing, if you need a team of 3 people to build something that prior took a team of 30 and became a bit bureaucratic and lethargic, is creating tremendous outcomes. And a lot of that is why these companies are able to scale so quickly, because not just the adoption from corporate customers and people who are willing to spend money on this, but the fact that these companies are moving at a pace that we've just never seen before. And it's the simplicity of being able to execute that is making a big difference.
Yeah. If you had to sort of cast your mind back, even just sort of 2 to 3 years, we didn't really have what we've got today. What if you had to sort of pinpoint some of those key moments in time that has allowed this to happen, what are some of the things that stand out to you?
I mean, I think November 22, when ChatGPT, did its first release, I think that was the moment that the broader world kind of woke up and said, what is this thing? This is a cool tool. Now, most of us started spending our time, writing, getting it to look at our emails, and we were writing poems and love letters and, asking it to design me a 1-week trip around Japan. I think we were using it for relatively trivial and fun things. But what we're now seeing that's super interesting is the power of melding these different LLMs together, whether it be Anthropic, OpenAI, Grok, etc., and then building on top of it. And that's where we're at today. And so when we think about AI, we think about kind of 4 different buckets. We think about infrastructure and GPUs, and Antler doesn't play too much in that space. Our model is really starting with some relatively small capital and scaling from there, and that's very, very capital intensive. We think about AI-enabled businesses. So these are businesses that existed before AI, but by bringing AI into the business, you're able to enhance it in ways that if you build it from scratch, this is what you would do. Then you've got the application layer, and these are businesses that just could not have existed prior to AI existing, in generative AI, any LLM models, etc. And then you've got the dev tools. And then, of course, you've got the fifth category, which is all of the other businesses that are not AI, but everyone changing their domain name to be .ai, so they still kind of appear relevant, right? And I think it's really the release of ChatGPT in November 22 that started the revolution amongst the application layer. And this is now where we're really seeing that big innovation. And now I would say a lot of the stuff that we're seeing today has been around for a few months, but it's just being discovered.
Got it. And therefore your thesis is it's only going to get better and better and better.
So I think the technology is getting better by the week. Like we could see it, conversational AIs that we're using, companies like Lovable, Copilots, coding platforms, right across the board. The actual underlying technology is moving at a crazy, crazy pace. I was at a conference recently in LA where the CEO of Perplexity was there to announce the release of Perplexity Enterprise, which is their layer that sits on top of your enterprise Google Drives. And he said, look, I was hoping to release it today, but we were looking at it last night and it just had too many rough edges, so we're actually going to launch it a day later. And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, this is not the kind of thing that a Microsoft or Amazon or a Google or an Apple would say, hey, we were looking at it last night, it had a few rough edges, so we're going to delay it by a few hours. But I mean, this is a reality. All of these LLMs and these big players here are in an absolute arms race against each other, where the lead that they have is days and weeks, not months and years. And they're just trying to get stuff out into the wild and really have a very tolerant user base that are happy to try these things instantly, report the bugs back, ultimately iterate through to solving all of the issues with them, and then get the next version out. And that is the pace of change and pace of iteration that we're seeing in the market. And that is a sign of how quickly things are improving and evolving. And then, of course, we occasionally are getting these shocks from the DeepSeeks, etc. So the technology is improving at an insane pace. What we don't really know yet is what is a commodity and what is not a commodity. And, are these big LLM models just absolute money pits that are being funded by the big giants because then the hyperscalers, because ultimately getting the technology to a place of advancement then enables the future economies, the future societies to build on top of that? Like, are these very profitable businesses, or is this just a giant R&D pit? And where does the actual cost end up of like what we will need to pay to use these? Like, how much are they being subsidized? And we don't know. Like, the answer is we don't know, and everyone can have their theories on this. But just when you think a DeepSeek comes out on whatever it is, and we don't know. But ultimately, a lot of these models become commoditized. And so what we think is like, what are going to be the valuable businesses of the future once you've kind of commoditized the technology layers? And it's really going to come back down to the same things that have always been true, which is, how do you get your distribution? How do you do that cost effectively? And are you building your distribution quicker than the incumbents are innovating? And both those things are happening much quicker now than they were before. And then what proprietary either data are you sitting on that allows you to do what you do that no one else is really able to do, that makes you really valuable? Or what very unique insight do you have in solving a particular problem that just because of some bizarre background or field that you've worked in that's some niche, that just there's very few people in the world that really understand this problem and how to tackle it?
Yeah. How much of an advantage is sort of speed in this kind of race, particularly on that sort of application layer, type of business? Is it just sort of like go, or is it a bit more, actually you got to be a bit more strategic? What's your sense there at the
Sorry,
moment?
I missed the first bit of the question, Anthony. How much of an advantage is
speed
speed?
in that race on the application layer? Yeah.
Yeah, speed's really important.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is like no longer having the best. It depends if you're building core technology or you're building at the application and you're building on top of it, leveraging all of these things. If you're just building at the application layer, then no longer having the best engineers in the world is a point of defense, or having the best salespeople in the world, or whatever it is. I mean, we've democratized a lot of human functions within these businesses, and so the ability for people to outcompete against each other is really high. Is really high. I also think that our market, the venture market, is demanding speed. And this is a big generalization, right? It obviously depends what it is that you're building, how complex, why are you operating at the speed that you're operating at. But I think speed is an additional factor that we are increasingly bringing into our investment committee decisions, because if you've got a great idea and you've got a great team, well, now there's lots of great teams that can build the same idea. And if you're not moving the quickest and building some level of defensibility and moat around what you're doing, then someone else probably is. I think also speed will equal value at the end of the day. And what I mean by that is that as early stage investors, one of the things that we think about a lot is dilution. Because ultimately we might start with a very decent position in a company, but over time, as the later rounds happen, we get diluted down, and that becomes worth less and less. But obviously, at the end of the day, hopefully, it's worth a very significant amount because the outcomes are big. The quicker companies are moving, generally, the less they're burning now. So speed is now a function, like much more heavily correlated to time, or sorry, cash is much more heavily correlated to speed and to time. And actually, if companies are moving quicker, they're able to get to those funding milestones quicker, which ultimately means that you're probably going to raise higher valuations, and therefore it'll be less dilutive. So we think a lot about that. But we do think, linking, I guess, dilution into that, if companies are able to move quicker because they've got 3 developers, not 30, then not only are they moving quicker, but they're obviously burning a lot less cash. So we actually think the barriers to entry have kind of changed in terms of what cash does it require you to build a really substantial business as well. And I think that is also super exciting and super interesting for entrepreneurs and founders looking to go and build businesses right now or get involved in startups at the earliest days. I think that smaller teams will go a hell of a lot further than what has been previously possible.
Interesting. And that's probably a nice segue into, I guess, this concept that's been flying around, the web around, a single person, $1 billion business. What do you think? Are we going to see it in the next, I don't know, couple of years?
The social part of me that likes working in teams and working with exceptional people hopes it's not true. Largely because if I could build $1 billion business on my own, it would be a hell of a lot more fun to build it with 3 or 4 of my closest friends. So maybe you'll see a 5 or a 10-person $1 billion business, and maybe not a single person $1 billion business. It'll take one heck of a narcissist to do that. But I do think that we'll get to the point of seeing 30 to 50 people teams that build businesses up to hundreds or 100 million or hundreds of millions of revenue. I do think that is absolutely true and will be the case. Why I think that is interesting, apart from the kind of financial implications of that, which are obviously great for the venture capital industry, great for investors and creating ridiculous returns, is in the old, let's call it the SaaS world, to get to $1 billion valuation, and not just a on paper valuation, but genuinely be worth maybe relative to market comps, public market comps, you might have needed a few hundred people or maybe a few thousand people. And it's a very rare CEO or founder that loves the journey from starting the business with 1 or 2 other people to being a team of 10, to being a team of 50, to then running a team of 200, to then running an organization of 1,000 people. And generally you find that they absolutely hate that part of it, right? The real founders are out there to build product. They're close to the product. They're close to the customers. They're solving real problems. They don't want to be spending all of their days managing teams of HR and this and this and this and this and this, and so far away from the coalface. And that's where we see a lot of transitions of management teams and leaders through the Series B, C, D rounds, etc., where founders, even if they're up to it, just absolutely hate that managerial part of the role. If you've got teams of 30 to 50 people, you're probably going to have a much greater chance of preserving that early culture that got you from the team, to the team from 10 to 20. You probably don't need to be as good a manager and can probably run that business in the same way without needing those layers of bureaucracy and unneeded layers of structure. And so I think, again, that really blows open who are the kinds of people that are able to build these highly valuable multi-hundred million, multi-billion-dollar businesses. Because if being a great manager of a large corporation is no longer a requirement, then we've probably just 10x, 20x, 50x the number of people that are capable of building these incredible businesses. And so, again, I think all of these shifts and changes that are happening are opening up a tremendous opportunity for people to create great solutions and create great wealth in ways that haven't been available to them previously and increase the chance of success.
Yeah, that's really interesting. With that in mind, are you therefore starting to see the profile of the founders that you're working with change? Are they, I don't know, younger, older, doesn't matter, all walks of life?
I think we've historically over-indexed on people with 8 to 10 years of real world experience. Now, half of the people we back have founded businesses before, some successful, some not successful, but they learn a lot trying. The other half are people that have got a really strong demonstrable track record of having done some brilliant things. They could be like the absolute best in a particular domain and they're like coming out of the corporate world. It could be that they were an early employee of a Canva or an Atlassian, have been on that growth journey and learned a tremendous amount and contributed to that growth. And the reason that we've selected those kinds of people previously is because running and growing a business is an insanely hard thing to do, where you're hitting brick walls every single day, and you've got to have this like irrational belief that no matter how hard it is, that you can jump out of bed next day and go, you know what, we're going to build this no matter what, and we're going to solve all of these problems and survive those near-death experiences. And what we found is that kind of historically kids are coming out of uni and you talk to them about what's been your biggest achievement and they've been the top of their class and they're really good academically, but it's like, what's the real life application of that in the real world where, it's not such a clean laboratory for you to express how good you are, and how do you suffer real life adversity and loss and challenges and difficult situations. And the demonstration of that has historically been very important to us. I think we have a much greater willingness now and need to be rethinking now about the people that we're backing, because I actually think that, the people out of uni is a really interesting cohort of people now.
Yes.
Where they've got these kind of tools available to them. And if, you don't need managerial experience anymore to run large teams, well, then that means that you don't need that. So, that's not important, may not be important anymore. I also think these tools are not exclusively that are out there for us and people over a certain age, right? And I spend a lot of time now with my son, who's 7, imagining up business ideas, and he's writing into Lovable and other platforms, and they're pretty silly ideas to start with, build me a Minecraft website that does this and this and this and whatever it is. But I think this generation growing up now are going to have an unbelievable ability to express their creation and creativity in ways that we could have only have hoped for. And therefore, you're going to see lots of really interesting people building businesses from the ages of 14, 15, 16, 17, not just post-uni. So we're absolutely starting to think a lot more about that, and looking more as to how do we cultivate and be part of that ecosystem, to essentially be a really great partner to that audience in building successful businesses.
Yeah. Are you also seeing that this, let's call it democratization of being able to build a robust business, is also allowing, say, people from other parts of the world to build really great businesses, whereas before that might have been a bit harder? Are you seeing a bit of that?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's what we've been doing. We're in 30 cities around the world. Our thesis has always been it takes phenomenal people to build phenomenal businesses, and that hasn't really changed. And we operate in some very talent-dense cities, right, and around the world. So, Sydney, Melbourne, you don't naturally think of them at the top of your list when you're thinking about global tech, but there's exceptional talent in both of those cities, Brisbane as well. In the US, we're in New York, Austin, and San Fran, but we're also in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and Singapore, and in Berlin and Bangalore, etc. And the level of talent in these areas is It's very dense. And all you're doing is you're just removing more unnecessary barriers that have maybe historically given their peers in the US a bit of an unfair advantage. So I think certainly when building at the application layer, there is further democratization. I have to be careful when we say democratizing. I don't think it means that just now everyone could be a great founder. It means that for those people that are exceptional, that have the capability, it probably just got a little bit easier or a lot easier. I will say with the one exception that, and someone asked me the other day, is Silicon Valley dead? And I said, no, I think the really hard stuff is still increasingly going to be in Silicon Valley. And I think if you're democratizing the application layer globally, then what is Silicon Valley where is their competitive advantage going to be coming from? And I think it's in solving a lot of the really difficult deep tech stuff that requires $50, $100 million, $500 million seed checks that you just can't raise that level of pre-seed or seed capital anywhere else in the world to really build transformative things. So you will, but not at the same rate. And so I think it's just going to be a bit of a reshifting and redefining of who can do what where.
Yeah. Interesting. Is there anything about all this that scares you? Especially for your kids as well.
I don't think too much about I think from a kid's point of view, will my kids are 7 and 4, will they go to uni? What kind of jobs will they have, etc. I've probably got a little bit of time to work that answer those questions. Also, I won't be working that out on my own. I think that society and the shifts that we see will work that out somewhat for me, and we'll work it out for each other. I think this thing that scares me the most is just how powerful these tools are. So on the one hand, we get very excited about saying, look, a team of 3 developers can now do what 30, 50 developers used to do, or we can build automation in our businesses such that we can build them at ridiculous paces without hiring bodies. The flip side to this is we're seeing the corporate world running at this at paces that we've never seen before. And if you can give these kind of co-pilots and automation agents to the best developers and they can do the work of 50 people with 3 or 5, then think about the big institutions that we have around the world and think about, let's just say it in Australia, where you've got thousands of software developers. And if 100 people can do the work of 4,000, then what are you going to do with those other 3,900 developers? And within customer service type functions, we've seen Klarna reduce over the last year their customer service department by 700 people, replaced with AI agents. Well, you think about these giant call centers that are around the world, just within our businesses, and then you think about entire economies built on call centers and service outsourcing, like in the Philippines or a lot in India. And I think, the world is generally pretty unprepared for the amount of automation and efficiency that can be brought into these ecosystems. And so on the one hand, we've been craving productivity, but on the other hand, I don't think our governments are necessarily ready for unemployment to move from 5% to 15 or 20%. And what worries me is who's ready and who's not ready for that from a government point of view. And are we ready to move to big societal and cultural changes that will require? And you start bringing in conversations about universal basic income again and things like that. But I think what probably worries me the most about this is that, Klarna have just replaced 700 people with AI agents. People are cutting out the dev teams and shrinking the dev teams because of this. This is a 2025 problem. This is not in 2028, 2029, 2030, we'll gradually shift to these economies. The corporates are running at this so hard because they're finding it very, very hard to grow. These big corporations are not growing. They can't get growth out of anywhere anymore. And so the only way to kind of improve their businesses, improve their margins, improve their profitability, maintain high share prices, is by cutting their costs. And they're finding really effective ways of doing this. But the outcome of that is mass unemployment. And I worry a lot about that. And I don't have many good answers.
Yeah. Look, one more question before I go on to some of the Q&A that's there. You moved to the US sort of 2 years ago, was it?
No, a year ago.
A year ago. Oh God,
Yeah.
time flies. Right. How has your perspective shifted from moving from here in Oz to the US? Like, has there been anything that you maybe think quite differently about because of that move at all?
I think I think what is interesting and quite starkly different from at least in the context of startups and founders and people building businesses is the bar of what looks good in terms of ambition and hustle in the US is just at a different level. Just at a different level. The founders are in offices. There is no question of work-life balance. Like, these founders are really, like, they're in a very competitive environment within the US. They're competing for capital. They're competing against many businesses trying to do the same thing. They're also in a giant playground where there's thousands of people they can raise capital from and thousands of customers they can sell to. But there is a tremendous urgency around everything that they're doing. And just what you think is like insane amounts of hustle and insane amounts of ambition and execution. The bar just looks very different over there. I don't think that we have any less talented people in Australia. I think we have incredibly talented people that are absolutely on par. There is just a different culture around an absolute need to win, and like operating that like failure is not an option. And I don't necessarily see it being quite as strong or permeating through our ecosystem here. And I don't think that that's the fault of anything other than when you know what good looks like. When you know what good looks like domestically, you kind of aspire to be as good as that and get there. But the rate of the pace of what goes on over in the US is pretty insane. So we do a lot of work in getting our companies out of Australia over to the US very, very early, whether they're moving over there permanently or building offices over there or just doing regular trips, because showing them what can be achieved and expanding their own limitations and horizons around that is actually driving really positive outcomes. And I would say that that's probably the main difference. The quality of talent is honestly it is just as good everywhere around the world, but actually showing what can be possible is not necessarily quite as visible or evident on a day-to-day basis for a lot of people.
Great, thank you. Look, just getting into the Q&A, so please type in your questions if you have some. Starting with Amul, your question is, given the rapid speed of integrating new AI products, how do you value the resulting low switching costs, risks of churn coming from an even newer product that's just as easy to implement quickly?
The answer is we don't know yet. Like, it's really hard to work out what is a commodity and what is not a commodity. Without going too deep into why I seem relatively relaxed about it and sleep well at night, as Anthony knows, the Antler model is to be the first investor in these companies, and we go in at relatively attractive valuations, generally sub $2 million, and really help those companies from there and provide tremendous amounts of value and support at the earlier days. We're not really taking valuation risk. The successful businesses will exit, many multiples from where we've invested upwards, and the non-successful businesses just won't work. But there are a lot of businesses out there that we're seeing, and this is very pronounced in the US, raising pre-seed and seed rounds at $100, $200 million valuations, raising $5, $10, $20 million. And I look at these businesses with no revenue, etc., and you can't work out yet whether they're going to be winners or they're going to be a commodity. And entering into these companies at kind of $100 million valuations seems particularly risky exactly for that question and that purpose. So by us sitting very, very early, investing in 500 companies a year globally, seeing the entire landscape of everything across every business model, every type of technology, every sector, helps us learn incredibly quickly and then be able to load more money and support the founders that seem to be onto the winners there. But it's a great question because we don't know.
All right. Thank you. Question from John. Are you seeing and discounting a lot of emerging startups as just LLM wrappers versus building core IP into their business model?
Yeah, I think again, it's too early to it's too early to think about just discounting something for being a wrapper. I mean, even the LLMs are essentially wrappers sitting on top of data centers and GPUs, right? And like themselves can be disrupted, as we've seen with DeepSeek, etc. And I think that we have to give credit to very, very strong operators and founders in being able to evolve their business time as our society and culture and the business opportunity evolves. I think ultimately the biggest winners are going to be companies that can develop a moat. But I think we also need to be really open-minded as to what that moat might mean. Like simply just being first mover advantage might be a moat in itself, might just be enough, right? Like Canva's a great example on all of these companies. They build a moat over time because they build the distribution, and the distribution might just be enough, or will in many cases be enough. They may not sit on anything particularly proprietary, but over time they build out that proprietary IP that ultimately means that they become better and better and iterate quicker than any new person that does it. They create the data source that ultimately makes them valuable, versus other companies that come in on day one that have a proprietary data set that they're building on top. So I think we have to be really open-minded as to, if you are just something that looks like a wrapper, what is it that you're doing that no one else is doing or very few other people are doing? Why, when you get it out in the wild, do you think that this is going to get picked up and be the thing that people adopt? And then when they start adopting it, what are you going to do to leverage the large customer base to build defensibility around that? And we're just learning. Like, we're trying everything at the moment without trying to be over prescriptive on this is the only thing that's going to work and everyone should build this way, because then we're at the greatest risk of getting it wrong. Whereas as investors, we feel this is probably the biggest opportunity that there has ever been to make tremendous returns and back a large number of winners in venture, largely driven by just the general speed and the capital efficiency at which these businesses are being built. So I'm sorry if that's a bit of a non-committal answer, but we're really at this point where just when we kind of try and put stakes in the ground, a DeepSeek or something else comes out and really changes our paradigms and how we're thinking. What I will say though, and maybe I'll share it on the screen. Am I able to screen share?
I'm
Just
not
have a
sure.
go. I'll
Yeah.
see what happens.
If I'm able to screen share, I mean, I can share. I've got to send a request, so I've just done that.
Yep.
But I can share just a screen about like how we think about some of these sectors and these opportunities. I can share here. So this just gives you a sense of the work that we're doing internally, thinking about what is the role of co-pilots and agents, and where do we think the biggest opportunity for operating within industries are. And they can be, whether it be in improving industry from creating efficiency or genuinely creating different outcomes. So we think the most exciting industry here is healthcare. And you can see how we've positioned this against, how much unstructured data is there? Huge amounts. So the ability to structure that is a massive opportunity, and that's obviously going to create tremendous health outcomes. How complex are the tasks? Really high. So this is where, again, co-pilots and agents are going to be able to just solve problems much better than the humans have been able to before, etc. And we think about different sectors like this. And then I think many people, but maybe not Anthony, will be encouraged or discouraged by the fact that we think that HR functions will be the most disrupted function within corporations as well, right? And so we do a tremendous amount of thinking around where are the opportunities for improvement, for efficiency. But the solutions we're really open-minded to, because they're just evolving so rapidly.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Pleasure.
Look, quick comment from required from Andy. So I'll just paraphrase quickly. There's a bunch of corporates that have maybe more legacy technology where maybe some of these AI tools don't always lend themselves well. Firstly, maybe any comment on that? And then secondly, are there any sort of particular types of corporate that you might see being impacted more. But I think the second one you sort of answered with that that slide just there.
Yeah, I think look, I think the opportunity for corporates, I'll say, are around like there's efficiency and there's growth. I think the efficiency is probably easier to get than the growth, just because of the automation, and there's case studies coming out every single day of like massive layoffs against big corporations. And I suspect that board members are going to board meetings saying, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we looking at this? And that technology is already at a pretty advanced stage. In terms of the, remind me what the first question was actually.
It's really you've got corporates with legacy systems.
Yeah. Okay.
This
Sorry.
impact
yes.
of dev
So I
tools
think
in
I look. I think
particular.
on So look, I think on this is whilst there are tremendous tools coming out that can work with unstructured data, the more structured you can have your data and the more you can have it all in one repository, the more you can layer all of these tools and these solutions on top to drive the outcomes. And so, one of the winners that I think are going to exist in this, if you've got all of these dev tools, you could start by building, first thing, build me a CRM. Now I don't need Salesforce, and now I don't need HubSpot and all of etc. I think the reality is the more stable the CRM or where you are sitting and hosting your data, and the more structured you can get it and the more clean you can get it, the more you're going to be able to leverage that to build on top of and create lots of different solutions. This is not me being some kind of prophet and genius, and hopefully this isn't a revelation to most people on the call, but for those corporates, I think the first step is always work out what data you have and where it is, and how do you get it all into a single database or a single place that is ultimately you can then start building on top of that. And that's really the first step. The good news is you've got tremendous technology that can do it. So we've got one of our companies in Australia is working in the property industry, helping corporates better understand how to manage their corporate properties and how to invest in commercial real estate. And they've just taken 29,000 PDF documents and been able to upload them, understand them, turn them into data, put it into structured data, and create a repository of data that just wasn't even possible to get before, because who's going to sit and benchmark and review that level of information? So I think get a really stable platform of data. Question whether you want to build that CRM yourself or actually rely on outsourcing that to people who are experts at that, because if that is really good, then the world's really your limit in terms of what you can build on top of that.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. Next question was, is there a big chance of market fragmentation for industries if the barriers for entry are low? So we would just see businesses pop up and it just becomes a race to the bottom in certain areas. Too early to tell?
Maybe. I mean, it comes back to then what's important. Like, what's important when people have tremendous, like, unlimited choice. Then, if we go and create 50 Think and Grows now and variations and push them all out there, how do I choose it? And maybe what it means is that businesses are going to have to rapidly evolve to differentiate themselves or get cut through in different ways. I think brand probably becomes more important, and brand retention and understanding the brand and brand trust it becomes insanely important. It always is important, but I think in a market if markets get flooded, but I think in other ways, I think that you can democratize certain industries, but in other industries, I think you'll probably find the large incumbents that really adopt this stuff very quickly probably becoming a little bit more monopolistic, because they just become better businesses. And who has the time to shop around 100 different insurance companies to buy small business insurance? Or if I'm going to look for a great executive recruiter, my job is not to find a great executive recruiter. My job is to hire someone great. And so do I want to spend all of my time choosing between 100 different executive recruiters, or do I want to just go based on who I know is great, etc., and know that they get the job done? So I think it will evolve and differentiate. I don't know that if it becomes totally democratized, then I think naturally at the end, you probably just end up going with brands that you trust and love. So, because otherwise it becomes too difficult.
Yep, makes sense. Tom's question, just to paraphrase it quickly, was, look, what are the realities of shifting AI code into basically a legacy code base when you've got a lot of proprietary, stuff that you've built over the years, and maybe you don't have a lot of, I guess, data for the LLM to sort of be trained off in terms of other, other, other things it can learn off. Any thoughts on how good these tools are going to get at doing this, or are they already ready to do that now?
They're already ready.
They're already ready.
I think the biggest thing that is going to be the difference between businesses that can evolve and not evolve is the concept of sunk cost. And I think that it's almost an exercise one might want to undertake, is to go, right, we've been building this business for 5-10 years, we are where we are, and that's great. If we were to start this business again from today, knowing what we know about our industry, but also what there is in terms of the technology tools, etc., how would we build this from today? And then I think you just have to be really honest with yourself and go, let's not hold on to legacy practices because we've worked so hard at this for 10 years, if that practice is now just redundant or democratized, because we've always done it and we love doing it that way. So I think a really useful exercise to do is to undertake that and work out how you're future-proofing yourself. So just don't get into the trap of, well, we've already invested in all of this money and doing it this way in the old world, and we don't want to have to write that off because the people who are starting the businesses today that may be competitive to you don't have that baggage, and that'll be a hindrance.
Yeah, great. Question from Aaron. How would you recommend getting exposure to the companies actually experiencing benefits from AI, I assume, so we can learn and transform our respective organizations? And I guess there's a question before that, which is, how do you identify the companies that are actually getting benefit first off in your mind?
So, I mean, it depends through which lens you're looking through. If you're kind of going, hey, I want to do company discovery because I want to see how I can implement, better customer services tools, or better finance solutions, or trim my software developers from 10 to 5, or actually have my 10 be able to do the capabilities of 100. Honestly, this stuff's being written about everywhere. I think you should start going down the rabbit holes. I think you should start using these tools yourselves so you can understand the power of them. And there are different newsletters and things that you can subscribe to. And I'd be pretty shocked if there weren't industry-specific or function-specific newsletters for almost every function of people that are doing all of this discovery. And of course, and looking for a customer lens. And of course, the companies are trying to get on these newsletters because they're trying to profile what they're doing and get spoken about. So I think number one, that is like how I would do it from that perspective. If you're talking through an investment perspective, like how do I invest in these things or gain access to them through that? Look, it's obviously Antler has one approach, which is we go very, very early, we go very diverse. We see everything without having to worry too much about predicting the future, because our founders are doing that, but the diversity across the portfolio is doing that. But almost every venture fund, I would say, if they're not building diverse portfolios of early stage early stage companies, and being really diverse, then if they're not talking about AI and everything being AI, it's probably not the right place to be. But I think more than ever now, diversity across portfolio is really going to matter, because we can underwrite amazing founders. We can underwrite things that are getting good revenue today, but we also don't know what the future will hold. And the diversity across the portfolio is going to make a big difference. So I guess my message to everyone in this is like, if you're direct investing into companies, there's probably never been a better time for creating asymmetric, phenomenal outcomes. But the risk at the moment is significantly higher, because the technology is moving so quickly that I've said it a few times, we don't know what looks good today that might be a commodity tomorrow.
Yeah, right. Thank you. And we might end on this question from Andy. What advice would you give to a senior developer who's looking over their shoulder at what's coming?
So I don't think we get to businesses that have no developers, especially tech businesses. Like tech businesses will still, like, technical expertise and the ability to move quickly is going to be the function of a really capable tech team that can now use these tools, as a team of 3, 4, 5 to do the work of 10, 15, 20 people. So you want to make sure you're in a group of 3, 4, 5 in doing that. And my advice is, become insanely good at prompting, become insanely good at using these co-pilots and these automation tools. I will tell you that the person who is the head of automation within Antler, that is building all of our automations, linking together all the systems, all of the rules, understanding how to use these LLMs, can't code. So, which was a revelation to me. I didn't even realize that until the other day when he spent an hour with me, and I was like, well, how would you change that code? He's like, I actually don't understand what some of this code is. I think understanding the code, but not having to write it, is still going to be relatively important. So you just have to immerse yourself in these tools and make sure that you are one of those people that ultimately can now do the work of 10 developers, etc., rather than be the person that's not on those tools. So that would be my strong advice.
Any last comments at all, Ant, that the audience might like to kind of ponder on?
No, I mean, I always feel that when I'm talking about this stuff, I kind of toggle between extreme excitement and extreme fear. And look, honestly, it is an insanely exciting time. We need to be prepared for what is to come. This is going to change societies. It is going to change cultures. It's going to tremendously impact politics and maybe even borders of our countries. But there's also never been a better opportunity to be entrepreneurial, to build something that is meaningful, to disrupt incumbents and the status quo. And I think if you're at that edge of innovation and you're part of the change, it's a tremendous opportunity, both from a purpose perspective in the things that you can solve, but also from a monetary and wealth creation perspective. And I would encourage everyone to focus on the opportunity rather than the fear. But really be very cognizant of how powerful this stuff is, but the implications of it as well.
Amazing. Look, we're pretty much out of time. Thank you very, very much, Ant, for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it, and have a great rest of your day and evening.
Pleasure. Thanks for hosting.
Okay, bye.
All right.